Okay, our next speaker is Professor Ramakrishna. He is responsible for the National Academy of Engineering Grand Challenge Scholars Program Network Office. And he will speak to us today on engineering, the enabling discipline for the 21st century. Professor Ramakrishna got his PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras in 1982. I guess today it will be called Chennai, right? And after that, he spent some postdoctoral time at ETH in Zurich. And then he joined the faculty of the Arizona State University, ASU, in 1985. He launched ASU's Grand Challenges Scholars Program in 2009, being its director until 2013. He's dedicated to preparing engineers that have not only the necessary engineering skills, but also the cross-disciplinary knowledge, entrepreneurial spirit, global perspective, and sense of mission needed for in the 21st century. He was the Diane and Gary Tucker Professor of Material Science and Engineering at ASU Fulton School of Engineering from 2011 to 2016, and a member of the Humanitarian Engineering faculty until his transition to Emeritus Professor status in 2016. He was selected to be a Jefferson Science Fellow in 2013 and served as a Senior Science and Technology Advisor to the Office of the Secretary of State. Professor Ramakrishna, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that at the start, Virginia gave me a very challenging opportunity here. That is, to be between you and the happy hour or the cocktails. So I think it's going to be challenging to make it both interesting as well as inspiring, is what she told me. So I'm going to just start a little bit with who I am from where I work, and then go through a few slides which will have three main takeaways, which I will then spend 3 parts of my presentations on. So I work at the National Academy of Engineering, and there's one thing that I want to also clarify at this point. This is not a US government organization, because I think sometimes people misunderstand that the National Academy of Engineering, like many in other parts of the world, are part of the government, but we are not. We are an independent 501c3 organization, non-governmental organization, whose main job is to advise both. It has to be a coordinated and cooperative effort. And then I believe that one of the ways that we can link us together is through educating the future engineers that will have these values that will be ready to address these grand challenges. So those are the 3 takeaways. The first one, I live in Washington, D.C., very close to this building. This is one of my most favorite buildings in Washington, D.C., the National Archives. And I walk there pretty much every day. My office is also not too far from this building. So when I go there, there are 2 statues that you notice there on either side of the building. One statue it says, "The Past." And it's showing an old man with a closed book, sitting with a book on his lap. And then it says at the bottom on the pedestal, it says, "Study the past if you want to divine the future." That's a quotation from Confucius. So that's one of the statues on one side. On the other side is this other interesting statue which says future, and that's a youthful woman gazing in contemplation, and she has a book that's open, yet to be written. And she holds the book, and the quotation under her pedestal says, "What is past is prologue." That means we get informed of the future by the past to work on the future. It's from Shakespeare's Tempest, that particular quote. But I think there's maybe a subtle or not so subtle lesson in this. You see, the past is an old man and the future is a young woman. So I think somebody was talking about diversity as one of the most important things that was to be added to the challenges of the future. I think this might give us some kind of a thought. Maybe people were thinking about it 100 years ago. So in kind of keeping up with the, informing from the past and going into the future, continuing with that theme, here is one activity that the National Academy of Engineering undertook in 2003. That is to look, the 20th century was a fantastic range of achievements for engineering. And they transformed the way we live, we work, and we interact with each other. And the list of 20, so the book was come out here, which was edited by Neil Armstrong, who was later inducted into the National Academy of Engineering as a member. And then these 20, I just wanted to just show you a few here. First one is electrification, which, if I do this in my classes with my students, they start somewhere in the internet or Facebook, which may not be in the 20th century even. So they don't even remember the most important ones, even electrification, water supply, and transportation, things like that. But anyway, that's one thing. But I want you to focus on number 12, space flight. And there's a reason for that, and I'll get to that. So this book is available as a coffee table book. It's a wonderful teaching kind of a unit that you can use. And also the website that goes along with it is also very useful and for professors and students alike. So focusing on space flight, why? Because about almost 50 years ago, Armstrong walked on the moon, for the first human being to walk on the moon. And he made this famous statement saying, one small step for man as he was getting out, and one great giant leap for mankind. And he did it in July 20th. And just last month in Washington, D.C., there was a wonderful show. This is available on YouTube if you look at it. This is the actual size of the Saturn V rocket. It's about 350 feet, which was projected onto the Washington Monument. And then there was a story told with sound and light and emotions, all on kind of based on President Kennedy's lecture that he gave when he said, we are doing these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And this was like a way to galvanize the whole country to do this kind of a completely task which was very daunting at that time, people thought. So that was just July 20th. And then this year's National Academy of Engineering's meeting, the theme is human space flight. And basically what the meeting is going to be doing, I don't know if some of you will be attending this or not, but what they're doing is actually looking again in the past and getting inspired into what human flight, space flight looks like in the future. There are many different ways that it's going, and that's the theme of this annual meeting for the National Academies. And so I wonder sometimes, 50 years ago, there was this giant mobilization of hearts and minds, but what are our moonshots going to be? What are the students in the next 50 years? What are they going to be thinking about achieving and so on? So this theme is something very important, I think. I don't know whether you noticed anything unique in this slide, in the center, where it says Neil Armstrong, July 20th, 1969. Under that, you see the date he was born is on August 5th, which is today. So it's kind of blew my mind when I just put that in these slides together. Yeah. So in keeping with, again, the same theme of looking in the past and going to the future, the National Academies of Engineering released this report in 2008, which was a study that was bringing together some of the leaders from around the world to look at what engineering challenges are for the 21st century. And then the main three themes was to inspire the generations to come, to educate them, and to challenge them to address this. And many of the problems are probably left behind by their parents and grandparents like us, and I can count as one of the causes for this problem. But the future is sitting there. Some of the students who are sitting there, they are the ones who are going to be really solving these problems. So how do you inspire someone? And sometimes when I think about inspiration, I turn to, like the president was mentioning of the university, like literature and art, because they are sometimes much more inspiring than what science and engineering can talk about. So I got this quote from George Bernard Shaw, a famous playwright, from his book Back to Methuselah. So where it's all about Adam and Eve and the serpent and the interactions. It's a very, very fascinating play. It's a 5-part play, but in one of the parts, part 1, the serpent is actually talking to Eve to imagine the future and saying all the things creative things that they can be done, and don't be satisfied with what is there right now, is what the snake is whispering. But this is what it said. You see things as they are and say why. And I could say roughly that is science in some ways. And then I dream things that never were, and I say, why not? I would claim that is engineering. So I think, as the previous speaker said, the science has already done its job. Let's now do the engineering job to fix what the problems are. So this is, I think, a very inspiring way of talking about science and engineering, even though George Bernard did not mean to be science and engineering in that sense. But it is also possible to give inspiring definitions of engineering. And this is from our previous president of National Academy of Engineering, Dan Mote. He says, you have to have a definition of engineering which is not more than 15 to 16 words. If it is too long, then people go to sleep. So he said, this has to be something that is just a few words. I think this is 13 words, if I'm not mistaken. And it has to capture the essence of it. It doesn't have to go into the details, because that's not what a vision and inspiration needs to be. So he said, engineers create solutions for the welfare of humanity and needs of society. And I think oftentimes we think of engineers as problem solvers, but I think that's kind of limiting ourselves a little bit. I think we have to say we are creators of solutions, even though it's almost the same, but I think it's like a different kind of a mindset that you have. And there are some reasons why these value propositions that I mentioned there are very important for this program that we're going to be talking about later tomorrow and day after, but also even for right now. That is, engineers are among the most creative people that can be there, because they're doing always things and creating things that never were. So that's creativity in kind of at its core. And in fact, the National Academy of Sciences, when it was founded in 1863, one of the lines in the charter said that you have to advise on all matters of science or art. And art at that time actually meant anything man-made, not just the paintings and the writings and stuff, but also engineering was included. So art is engineering, even back in 150 years ago. I think we are staking claim to it again right now. And then the second word that is highlighted there is solutions, and I think that's very important as well, because it's not in singular, it's in plural. That means that it is contextual, it's based on boundary conditions that is existing in different parts of the world, and different economic, social, cultural norms that are there. So we have to take into account all of these type of things when we are designing solutions. So that's, I think, it's very important. And finally, both humanity and society, what they are really saying is that this is really what engineers are all about. That is, we want to make the world a better place. So always thinking about keeping that as the central theme or idea of why you are becoming an engineer. And I think never forgetting that is very important. So I think this is also an equally inspiring definition of engineering, I would say. Now, I think in some of the, sports metaphors, like let's say your local team in Belo Horizonte wins the soccer championship for Brazil. I think the people who go to the coach or the players, the first thing they're going to ask him, are you going to repeat it next year? They're not going to even say about how you did it, how you became the champion this year, but they're always talking about the next year. So that's exactly what happened here as well. The National Academies were first tasked with looking at the past of the 100 years and then said, what's going to be engineering contributions in the next 100 years? And very quickly they understood that that's a wrong question to ask, because we cannot even predict 5 or 10 years. Who imagined that we could be, surviving without GPS or the smartphones? We cannot even imagine the time which it was how we were even finding our way in the world at that time. So we can't even imagine, 100 years. So what they said instead was, let's not focus on what are the achievements are going to be, but let's focus on what should the vision for engineering be. And so the first sentence in that slide shows this is the vision for engineering. Continuation of life on the planet, making it more sustainable, safe, healthy, and joyful. And this was mentioned a few times. I was so happy to hear the same 4 themes multiple times in the introductions earlier. And I think here again, some of these words are very important. Life on the planet, it doesn't say human life, it's all life. In aquatic life, avian life, and not only human. So I think it's a more comprehensive view of what engineering should be doing. And again, it's a planetary vision, not just for a country or for a region, for anything like that. So because everything is connected right now, and so I think it has to be a planetary vision. So that vision statement led to a set of goals, which I'll come to later, and then 2 objectives to reach those goals and finally to realize the vision. And the 2 goals are building the talent. That's what we are here for in this workshop tomorrow and day after. And then also doing the R&D, the research and development, to address some of the questions that were brought up in the previous presentation. So I'm going to spend a few slides on the talent building piece and then come back to the R&D effort and also the grand challenges later on. So again, as I said, we release 250, 300 reports every year. These 2 were released in 2004 and 2005. I think probably Dr. Miller was part of either one or both of these reports. And they were about what the engineer for 2020 should be and how do you educate the engineer for 2020. And these are some of the amazing reports that I think have been one of the most downloaded reports from the Academy for people to use around the world, and it's free for everybody. One of the things it said was in facing these grand challenges, a lot of things have been taking place, and they quoted these 8 people. I think most of you in the room will probably recognize all of them, maybe except one. So I'm just going to give you a second just to look at all of them, and then maybe I'll just focus on maybe one that you may not have recognized. So should we go through all the names? The first one, I think not too many people may have recognized. How many people recognize the first one, the first woman? Probably not. Yeah, second one is Gordon Moore, founder of Intel. Third is Albert Einstein. Fourth is Martin Luther King. Fifth is Eleanor Roosevelt. The sixth one down below is the Wright brothers. Seventh is Pablo Picasso, painter. And the last one is Bill Gates. And the reason I'm showing you this was, in this report, there was this fantastic statement. I was really blown away by that statement. And it said, the engineer of the 21st century will aspire to have the ingenuity of Lillian Galbraith. And I'll tell you a little bit about Lillian later at the end of this slide. Problem-solving abilities of Moore, scientific insight of Einstein, creativity of Picasso, determination of Wright brothers, leadership abilities of Bill Gates, conscience of Eleanor Roosevelt, vision of Martin Luther King, and the curiosity, wonder of our grandchildren. So this sounds like a lot on the plate of the, engineering educators to create such an engineer for the future. But I think there are some blueprints and methods to reach here, and that's what we're going to be talking about through the Grand Challenges Scholars Program. Just a little bit about Lillian Galbraith. She was just around the century. She was turn of the last century, around 1910. She was studying in Berkeley, and she actually submitted a thesis. She was actually a psychologist to start with, but she was very much interested in what we call today human factors engineering or industrial engineering, at large even. And she submitted a thesis to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, but she was refused her PhD at that time. And then she got a little bit, disappointed, and then she moved away, then went to Brown University with her husband and moved there. And then about 5 years later, she submitted another thesis, and then it was accepted. And I was wanting to quote you the title. I don't want to misquote you the title of her thesis. Let's make sure. Yeah, her title was Eliminating Waste in Teaching Engineering. So that was in 1915. So she submitted and she got her PhD there. So she was also a prolific inventor. She invented some of the things that make our life easy. Like, for example, even the simple thing like, when you have the garbage can, you put your foot there and then it lifts up and then you can throw the garbage there. She invented that. She invented various things inside the refrigerator to hold things like even the eggs and stuff like that. She was a very, way ahead of her times and a prolific inventor as well. So that's the reason why she is there in this slide. So the Grand Challenge Scholars Program, we can claim that it does a little bit of what is mentioned in the vision for educating the engineer for 2020. So it has to have, this depth, because engineers are defined by the technical depth. So we're not going to give that up for other things, but we can have that and other things as well. So that's what this Grand Channel Scholars Programs does. So it is the multidisciplinary. It was mentioned many times, because many of the problems that we are addressing are not purely engineering or technical problems. They're like socio-technical, economic, cultural. So they get all elements into that thing. So an engineer has to be really at least somewhat conversant in this, if not an expert, but at least ability to converse with other people and have discussions, and then have a co-design solutions to the problem. So that's the reason why it's critical. And also it's the business and entrepreneurship mindset is also very important. Unless an engineer invents something or designs something, if it's just sitting on the shelf and not making people's lives better, it's useless. So unless you have a way of thinking about how to translate that ideas into the marketplace is very critical. So that's the third mindset that's very important. The global multicultural was mentioned again as an important, because again, many of the people that are in this room who are going to be engineers in the future, the students, are not going to be just working in their own countries or regions, but they're going to be collaborating and maybe even physically going into other parts of the world and then working with colleagues from around the world. So that kind of a multicultural and planetary mindset is very important as well. And finally, unless you do something that is desired by society, you're also not doing good things. So it's in the science will bring you the kind of the ability to do things, and business will bring you the viability, and then the social consciousness will bring you the desirability. So engineers work at the kind of confluence of all three things. So now coming to the kind of the R&D piece. So the 14 grand challenges of engineering are become quite quoted quite a lot. But I think what is I feel more important is the 4 themes that were mentioned many times during the introductions earlier that you heard. Themes of sustainability, health, security, and then the joy of living. Those are actually more important. This set of 14, I believe, are exemplar sets. That is, at that time when the report was released in 2008, they said that this is a good set of 14 challenges that we can focus on. It did not mean to be exclusive. It's only an exemplar set. So like, for example, it was mentioned in the previous talk about wind energy. Wind energy does not appear here explicitly. Only solar energy appears. But that doesn't mean that it's not a grand challenge, and also addressing the grand challenges. So I think that's what one point I want to kind of get through in this particular slide. So the 4 themes are kind of the more important. The other report that we released in 2017 was providing kind of a new guidelines for a vision for engineering research centers. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Engineering research centers are kind of the pinnacle of engineering funding from the National Science Foundation, and they could be like 5, 10, 15 years a lifetime, and then they also garner the largest amount of funding. And they bring together both researchers, educators, and also the community, industry, and others into the program. But that has been already 25, 30 years ago. And our report said, let's take a look at it again and then put a new vision for engineering research. And we came up with this report in September 2017, and it's available at that link that I quoted at the bottom. But I just highlight just the 2 differences between the kind of the traditional engineering research centers, the top 3 points, and then the convergent engineering research centers, which is in the bottom 5. And you just look at the words again that was mentioned before. Transdisciplinary was there, is here. Impact on societal challenges. So the engineering research centers are now focusing on societal challenges. And then exploiting convergence of the various things. And I'll mention a little bit about what I mean by that in the next slides. And then also, I think some of it might have been, alluded to a little bit here, but bringing social sciences as appropriate into the mix of providing the solutions. So those are some, and we were very, very happy that as soon as we submitted this report, within about 6 months, the National Science Foundation translated that into a solicitation. And then there was about 100 grants given to planning grants for 1 year. And then now we are in the stage of getting the full grants for the next set, or the first set of these CERCs. So I want to go now to a little bit of maybe a repetition of some of the slides that were shown in the previous presentation, but I think it just will be okay to say this again. We have two major forces in our planet. One is the demographic explosion, which hopefully is tapering off, and it was mentioned 10 billion by 2050, but that may be a good number to focus on. The other one is the kind of the changing the way that the global economy is working. And the two inputs to the global economy are the technological revolution that's occurring, and the kind of economic, the way that economics is working is also changing very fast. And because of this, there are lots of challenges that we'll be facing. And then this particular figure that I showed before, and also this figure that is here, are from this book by Jean-François Richard, who was formerly a vice president of the World Bank, but also a technologist. So he was well-versed in technology, but also he was an economist. So he had brought together both of them together. And then he said, in this book, which says, 20 global problems in 20 years to solve them. This was written in 2002, and we're almost 20 years away from there. But I think he could again publish this book with the same title in 2020 and say 20 years and 20 global problems in 20 years. So we have not made the kinds of progress that we hope to have made on these things. And there is a big gap, as you can see in this right slide. Both global economies and technologies are going exponentially. I think population, we have maybe dented it a little bit, so it's okay. It's not as fast as the other ones. But the ability and the capacity of institutions such as the universities and policymakers in government, etc., are not going so fast. They're almost linear. So every year the gap is increasing bit by bit. And the more the gap grows, the more dangerous it is. So he published this thing in 2002, as I said. But not only him, there are other people who have said the same thing. There's a famous book you might have read, Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, which said technology is changing too rapidly and humans can't cope with it. So that was in 1970, he said that. And then in 2016, Tom Friedman wrote in a book, Thank You for Being Late. And he may be a little bit of a, kind of a doomsday sayer, but I think he does make a point, and in a very eloquent way. And so he said that, it's going too fast, but we can catch up if we have the right programs and the mindsets and so on and so forth. So he showed his curve. Many of Tom Friedman's curve are very simple, without any units on either of the axes that engineers sometimes shudder to show these kinds of slides. But just because he doesn't really know what time is when and things like that. So it's very qualitative kind of representation of his work. But I think if you want to get a more kind of a quantitative way of looking at this, and this slide and the next slide are courtesy of Yanis Yortsas, the dean at University of Southern California. He gave this slide, which is kind of an adaptation of both Tom Friedman's slide and also the previous slide by Richard that was showing this gap between the two. And then there are two things, and he says the measure of this way of the rate of change is because not only the slope is high, but the slope is increasing each year. Okay, so that's the reason why it's exponential, going so fast. And there is no such thing as steady state growth anymore. And then if you have, at least I thought we'd be having one derivative to show in the engineering presentation. So this is my only derivative here. So this one says, if the rate of change is proportional to the actual element itself, then it's going to be, you'll be an exponential change. But if it's anything more than the first power, then you will reach a singularity. So sometimes we have to worry about, is there going to be a singularity if any one of these parameters are changing. And then I was thinking about what are the things that actually, even during the previous presentation I was thinking, there are many resources that were mentioned, like food, water, forests, etc. Most of these resources, as we consume them, they get diminished. The only resource that when you consume, it's going to be increasing is knowledge. And that's, I think, is the reason for this exponential growth of technology, and knowledge, and so on and so forth. Because as you consume more knowledge, it grows even faster. So that's one of the, I think, the only resource that we can say it grows more as you consume it. So I think all of these are coming because we are reaching a kind of a knowledge revolution period. So this is again courtesy of Yanis Yochas. He says this engineering has reached a kind of a new age right now because of the fact that it's exponential technologies, as well as the fact that many disciplines and technologies are converging. And then there are some examples at the bottom which are converging, that nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, communication, cognitive technology, etc. They're all converging as well. And then in this particular slide, you can see that E union of X is what that stands for. And basically what it is that it's not just E integrating with some X, or E kind of contributing to some X. It's actually a union, which means it's something much more, as people from like set theory will understand. It's much more than just a kind of integration of disciplines. So here, what is happening is because of the fact that E is making a union with X, where X can be any of these things, medicine and media, etc., as mentioned here, it not only makes engineering much more efficient and much more smart, but also it has an impact on X, which is medicine or media, etc. There are like smart stages and smart place, etc., where people don't have to control all the lighting and the sounds. As actors move, things can actually change without any problem because of engineering. And because of the fact that they are intertwined, both engineering and whatever that X could be that you can imagine, including politics and others, I think it's leading to a new kind of revolution of what engineering can be. And this is also captured a little bit in the World Economic Forum's fourth industrial revolution. There are 3 industrial revolutions that are shown here, which obviously changed our life a lot. The first one actually relieved us from animal power, right? The steam-based engines. Animal power was what was available until then. Then the next one was because of mass production. The human labor itself was becoming more valuable and better utilized after that revolution. The third revolution made knowledge and data and other things available at our fingertips, the kind of data and information kind of revolution. Those 3 revolutions, changed us a little bit, but the fourth industrial revolution, with coming up with artificial intelligence and big data and all of those things, and the way that they are interacting and converging, is actually even questioning what does it mean to be human, even. So it's even making things beyond just making our life simpler and easier and more comfortable, etc., but it's even questioning us, humanity itself. So I think this is a kind of a different kind of a beast compared to the previous revolutions, and we have to be prepared for creating the engineers for this. So the last part of my presentation will be on this, we are all in this together. So again, I bring the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I want to show the synergy between UN Sustainable Development Goals and the NAE Grand Challenges for Engineering. The UN Sustainable Development Goals were, as was pointed out, was like aspirational goals for the planet, where nearly 200 countries have embraced them as frameworks for their policies, for development, even for their education and so on. So I think that's now a well-accepted kind of a platform that everybody is using. It actually goes, the 17 goals are there, and the 17 goals are mentioned here, plus I think the 17th, The 17th is not here. Oh no, 17th is here as partnership. Sorry. So it goes from basic needs in at the kind of the left end of the slide to ensuring prosperity. And what is enabling this is going to be engineering, and was mentioned at the last slide of the last presentation, policy, and then also innovation is, I put it a little bit different from just engineering. So engineering innovation will enable this path. So the NAE grant challenges were in these 4 kind of themes again: the sustainability, security, health, and the joy of living. And then one can actually map the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all to these 4 themes. And 17, the partnership is actually encompassing all of them. So partnership is something that's critical, and I hope we're beginning to build the partnership here with Brazil in that particular regard. So there are other global interdependence tendencies, especially one of which I want to point out is the kind of the nexus between energy, water, and food. This was again mentioned in the previous presentation. And then I want to kind of highlight that we are again all in this together. Unless we work in concert, the countries and universities and people all over the world, we will not be able to address these grand challenges of engineering. I'm going to close with just a couple of quotes here. One of them is from a Chinese kind of a philosophy which uses this word wei ji for the word crisis. But you can see that it's made up of 2 characters. The first character stands for challenges. The second character stands for opportunities. So they view crisis, this is from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago even, they view crisis as a combination of both the challenge and an opportunity. I think that's something that we should inculcate in our students, because I think the students here are coming at a great time because of the great need to solve these challenges, but also they are now equipped with fantastic resources and technologies and means of solving them. I think this is the very first time that you have understood what the challenges are, as well as have the tools to address them. I think that's very critical. And this is a kind of a shameless advertisement for GCSP, that I think GCSP could be a model that can address not only grand challenges of engineering, but also other grand challenges like initiatives like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is my last slide. So when I just put this here because people can view this as 2 different ways. One is how can I get from here to there, but you can also use this as stepping stones as when crossing a great river or a rock-filled path like this. So thank you very much for your attention.